Hey guys, and welcome to Cubstart Web. My name is May, and I'm one of the instructors this year. So traditionally we would do intros where we all come up and introduce ourselves, but since it's online, I'll just be introducing our staff this year. So there's me, and then there's Ethan. He's a another fourth year CS major. And then we have Mauricio, another senior CS major, and Jessica, a first year applied math major. And this will be our staff this year. All right, so the course website is cubstart.com, and most of the information can be found within the schedule tab. So I'll go ahead and show you guys what that's like right now. Here's make sure you're on the web tab, not the iOS tab. And there's just some enrollment information right here and then the schedule. And as the course progresses, I'll be posting slides and homework as we go. And yeah. And then sorry, I'm a little bit sick right now. But for Gradescope, this is the enrollment code and EdSTEM. So Gradescope is where all the homework will be, and then EdSTEM is where you can ask us questions and we will be on there answering it. So it's kind of like asynchronous office hours. All right, so let's just go over some course expectations. Lectures will be released Wednesday mornings on YouTube, and this is our channel name, Cubstart by Hackathons at Berkeley, and the slides will be posted on cubstart.com. I think the night before, that's it. And homeworks will be released alongside lecture on Wednesday mornings and due 2 weeks after they're released. And they'll be graded on a scale of 1 to 5, and you can access them on the schedule tab. And honestly, don't worry that much about grading. I feel like as long as you put in, or as long as we can tell that you put in good effort, you will get credit for it. So, yeah. And then our attendance policy, or I guess since it's online, it's not really attendance, but you can drop up to 2 homeworks. And I think it would just be like great if you guys didn't drop more than 2 homeworks. But like if you guys have extenuating circumstances or anything, we're very flexible. Like let us know. You can make a private post on Ed or you can email us. I think there'll be a slide later on talking about communication. But yeah, we are super flexible, so don't get like stressed out or anything about it. And then we do have a final project in this class. This can be done by yourself or with a group, and we'll have a group formation thread on Ed closer to the project deadline or closer to when the project gets released. But for Berkeley students, we'll have a demo day on campus where you can present your project and show us what you made, and it's super fun. All right, and then in terms of using like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you guys are using, LLMs these days are very good at web development because I think there's a lot of open source like web dev repositories out there on GitHub, and so the material they've been trained on is very good. Um, so pretty much it will definitely be able to like one shot all these homeworks or projects or stuff, but I mean, if you're in this course, I'm assuming it's because you actually want to learn web development. So, I mean, LLMs can be very useful for helping, like, to explain, like, um, what CSS property should I use here, or like, what does this HTML element do? But, yeah, I guess kind of just what you're gonna get out of this course is what you put into it. So, um, I mean, we can't stop you guys from using LLMs to do all the homework and stuff, but um, our intention, I guess, is that you guys will learn something from this course and be able to come out of it with some good web development skills. So, yeah. And then, as I said before, we have an EdSTEM where you guys can ask us questions. And if you guys have more like sensitive matters, you can make a private post on Ed, or you can email us at team@cubstart.com and make sure to put Cubstart Web in the subject line so that we know it's web that you're talking about in iOS. All right, so let's get into some content. What is full stack web development? In general, there are two parts to a web app. So there's the front end and then there's the back end. So the front end is whatever you'll see when you type in like a URL in your browser. Like if you go to google.com, you'll see like a search bar and some buttons. And this is basically like what you interact with. And then almost all web apps have a backend that manages the data storage and talks to other servers and stuff like that. Like, for example, if you had a chat app like Facebook Messenger, you have to store like all the messages between people somewhere, and that's what the backend is for managing that data. All right, so in terms of front end, which is what the user interacts with, these are the most basic tools: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is what we're going to talk about today, and it's used for the structure and content of your web page. And then we have CSS, which allows you to style your web page and make it look however you want. And then JavaScript allows you to add some like interactivity and logic. And over the next few weeks, in the first portion of this course, we'll be covering front end, and then we'll just be covering like the basics of these. And then there are some more advanced frameworks out there. You've probably heard of like React or Angular or Vue. And it's kind of just a step above basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript directly. These frameworks kind of allow you to make bigger applications more easily with like more organized and modular code. And we're going to go into React optionally at the end of this course, but we will not go into the other frameworks. But it's just something to keep in mind if you're interested. There's lots of resources online that you can explore Angular and Vue with. But yeah, so now the back end are things that like the user doesn't see. Like there's business logic, like if you are sending someone money, like using your bank website, that the back end would have to deal with that. And there are APIs, which we'll talk about more later on in this course, to send and receive data from the servers. And then finally, there are like databases that store information and allow you to manipulate it. In this course, we're going to be using Node.js and Express for the backend. These are just some tools that we've chosen for you to use, mostly because it's easy to set up and easy for beginners to like hop right into. But there are a ton of different languages you can build the backend with. A lot of people use like Java or um, yeah. But on the database side, we'll be working with MongoDB, and there are other types of databases as well. Like if you've taken 61A, which is a course here at Berkeley, you've probably worked with SQL in the past, and a lot of databases use that. And MongoDB is a tiny bit different, as you'll see in future lectures. Sorry. So overall in this course, we'll gradually be teaching you guys the MERN stack, which stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. And with this stack, you can build pretty much any application that you want from the front end to the back end. So pretty exciting. You'll have all the tools that you need to build your own full stack app after this. All right, so let's just go over a quick example to give you guys more of like a tangible concept since this has all been like very high level. Let's say I go on my phone and I go on Instagram or I go on like Instagram.com on my computer. The first thing you're gonna see is like this feed with posts and like all your friends' stories and stuff, and that's the front end. That's what the user interacts with. That's like the site structure and it includes the UI, colors, buttons, and like we talked about, it also includes the site logic. So like when you like a post, there will be like this heart animation that pops up and one will be added to the like count. So this kind of UI and display is handled on the front end. And now on the back end, there might be some algorithms like what kind of post does the user want to see, or like also how they load and store information in the database, like the like count or like follower count or whatever that I talked about earlier. And all of this backend stuff is not running on your computer or like your phone or your device. It's running on a computer or server somewhere in the world that's owned by Instagram. And then finally, these two computers, like your phone and like Instagram server somewhere, will be communicating via API requests to send the data from your computer and get data back from Instagram servers. So this is just a quick example of the workflow of how web apps work. And in future lectures, we'll also go more in depth into this, especially when we cover APIs and backend tools. So what can you expect to get out of this course? Cubstart Web is kind of meant to be an introduction to the field of web development. Now, the field of web dev is super vast and like always evolving. I'm pretty sure like in the last like years that this course has been taught, there's a ton of new like libraries and frameworks that are coming out, and there's a ton of resources online that you can learn from. And this class is about like 12 weeks, so we can't really teach you everything you need to know to be super experienced in everything related to web development, obviously. But this course is meant to be more of like an introduction to these tools and giving you an opportunity to learn how they work at an introductory level. And if you're interested in it, then you can like if you like what you're doing, then you can go look into it on your own time. And this course will kind of just provide you like a very solid foundation to build like your own knowledge on top of. Like I also took this course a few semesters ago and I was super interested in like specifically the React part. So I ended up looking into React on my own time and later on and I got my internship and now my full-time job because of it. So this course, I feel like, is just a super great introduction to tools that you want to have if you want to get like a software job or go into like full stack or front end or back end development later on. All right, so here's our schedule right now. There are still a few things that we need to figure out, but the content is mostly solidified. The first 3 weeks, we're going to be going over HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then we'll switch over into APIs, which are kind of bridging the gap between the front end and back end, as I talked about before. And then we'll cover writing backends with Node.js and Express and databases. And then we'll conclude with some intro to React. And then at the end, there's going to be a project where you or like you and a group get to build your own full stack app, which is super exciting. All right, so let's get into some content. How do we create a bare bones website? So first of all, what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's basically the skeleton of whatever page you're looking at online or like whatever page you're building. And it includes like both the skeleton or structure or content of the page and some descriptions on how it should appear. So right now on the screen right now, you'll see some basic boilerplate or like starter code with some tags that we'll go over. And you'll probably get very familiar with this boilerplate code over the coming weeks. But yeah, basically just HTML just gives you the structure and content of a web page. So what are HTML elements? Like in this boilerplate here, we see all these like things like this word meta or title or something surrounded by these tags. What are HTML elements? They generally consist of like an opening and closing tag with content within them. So in this example, we have a paragraph tag denoted by this open bracket and then P and then close bracket. And then we have some text content, and then we have this closing tag, which matches the opening tag, but it just has a backslash in front of it. But like, what are these HTML tags? They're basically keywords, so they won't be visible on the page itself. So like if you visit this page, you're not going to see like P, my cat is very grumpy, P. But they're keywords that define how this element will appear or what it should do. So tags pretty much give your website content structure. And there are a lot of different HTML tags. If you're interested, you can look them up. But like for example, the H1 tag is the largest header and its content will be bigger than the paragraph tag by default. So the main takeaway here is that like different tags display content differently. So if I use the H1 tag, my web page is going to look like this, and if I use a paragraph tag, it's going to look like this. And now another important thing that HTML elements can have are attributes. So attributes are things that can modify the behavior of an element. And these mostly come into play when we want to style certain tags or add some interactivity to our web page. And in the coming weeks, we'll get more into using attributes like class or ID, and you'll see like just how relevant these are using CSS and JavaScript. But like this is just an example of an attribute. You put it in between the opening and closing tag of the opening like paragraph element, and then it'll usually be something like class equals or like ID equals or maybe like reference equals or something. All right, so here's some common like HTML tags. Um, like here we have, this is like the boilerplate code that I showed you on the slide earlier. And here we have our body and we have this H1 and then this paragraph tag. So we can go ahead and like, let's add another tag like H2. Um, let's just put like, hello guys in here. Oops. And then see how it's kind of like smaller than the H1, but it's larger than the paragraph tag. This is kind of an example of how choosing specific HTML elements can make your web page appear in a different way, even if you're not styling it with CSS. But yeah. Okay. So this is like the kind of top of the boilerplate code right here, this head section. Just to give you guys kind of like um, to help you guys locate what this code snippet is actually supposed to be in a real HTML website. So it might look a little bit intimidating to begin with, but we're going to walk through it step by step. So this first line right here declares the type of the document to be HTML. And then we have these HTML tags that express the beginning and end of our document. So if I go into our editor right here, we'll see that like this HTML tag opens and then at the very bottom it closes. So these tags are kind of like encompassing everything within it. And a lot of HTML structure will be like that, where like we'll have a bunch of tags like within other tags, and it will create this kind of like nesting structure. Um, but yeah. And then next, we have this, or wait, let me talk about something else real quick. So, um, the opening tag is here, like at the very top, and then the closing tag is down here, and you can tell it's a closing tag because of this front slash. And another really nice thing about HTML, as I was talking about, like different tags will enclose a bunch of other tags within it. And it's really easy to see the parent, child, and sibling elements because of the indentation. So, like all these link elements right here are siblings, and then like this head element is the parent of all these elements within it. And it's really easy to see like because of this structure of indentation. So this head tag contains metadata about the page, which isn't actually displayed on the page itself. And the title tag will display the name of the web page. Like when you look something up on Google, that's what appears in the Google search results. And it's also in the tab space. Like right here, it says online HTML editor. That's what your title will be. Um, and then these are link tags. And this is our first example of an element that doesn't need a closing tag. So you'll see here like title has a closing tag, but link, like there's no like backslash link over here. And that's kind of just a quirk of HTML. Like some tags will just not have closing tags. Like I think also the image tag doesn't have one. Um, I don't really know why. It's just something you kind of have to memorize. Um, so this first link is like the little icon that appears next to the title in the tab space. So like for example, it would be like this little P image or like this little Google Slides image right here. And then this second link links to an external style sheet, which we'll talk about more next week. And then finally, this meta tag just gives you more information about the web page. You don't really have to worry about it. It's just like saying, make sure the web page like takes up the full width of your screen. Um, All right, so this next tag is important. This is the body tag, and anything you want to be displayed on your website should be inside the body tags. So this will lay out all the visible content on your web page, like headers or text. All right, so here's some different text elements in HTML. We have some different headers and the normal paragraph text, and as you can see, the header number increases, the size and boldness, or as the header number increases, the size and boldness decreases. So header one is like the biggest, and then it goes all the way down to, I think there's like six of them. So header six will be like smaller, and then the paragraph tag just displays normal text. So text formatting. This is how we can manually style the font in HTML without using any CSS. So if you want to bold or italicize or underline any text, these are the tags that we can do it with. And kind of note this next nested structure of a full open closed bold tag within the paragraph tag. In HTML, we want to put elements like inside other elements. That's kind of what gives like our website structure. So for example, right here, I can like, let's say this text is bold. And then I'll put like, and see how this tag encompassing bold only makes that like one word bold. But if I wanted to make the whole like more of it bold, I could just like move this further down. But yeah. Um, okay. So the image tag, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like self-closing, like the link tags that we saw before. So notice how there's no closing tag. It's just like image and then it just ends like this right here. And the image tag always has a source. This is an attribute that will specify the path to the image. So like I was talking about before, class and ID are attributes, but source is also an attribute. And there are two ways to link the source of an image. Firstly, we can use absolute URLs, which link to an external image hosted on another site. Um, so it's like it'll be hosted on a server somewhere. And these links will include HTTPS or HTTP. And then we have relative URLs, which link to images that are hosted within the website that this page is on. So it'll be like relative to the current page. So the main difference here is that this one is like externally hosted and this one is on the same web page that this page is on. I think this will, it might be a little bit confusing, but it'll be clear as you make your own website and add images. So to add a link within your website, you want to use the A tag. And kind of similarly to the image tag, they have the attribute href, which stands for hypertext reference. And the value of that is an attribute, or the value of that attribute is a string of the website that your URL is linking to. And then the content within the A tags is going to be the text that the user clicks to go to that website. So for example, we have the link here is calhacks.io, and then the text for our link is going to be learn more about calhacks. All right, so unordered lists. To write unordered lists, we're going to use UL tags. So the UL tags define the start and end of your list and enclose the LI tags, which are list items. So this is just like another example of the importance of the nesting structure of HTML. And since it's an unordered list, there are no numbers. It's just bullet points. And then for ordered lists, it's exactly the same as unordered lists, except you want to use the OL tags instead of the UL tags. And that will just render like a numbered list instead of a bulleted list like here. All right, so buttons have an opening and closing tag, and then an important attribute is the on-click attribute, which tells you what should happen when the button is clicked. And it's going to be a string with a function name, and you can write that function in JavaScript, which we'll get to in 2 lectures. So it might be a little bit confusing right now, but don't worry, it'll be definitely cleared up in 2 weeks. And then the content inside the buttons tag is just going to be like the text that's displayed within the button. So don't worry about the JavaScript for now. I think this is mostly just showing you like different HTML tags out there and how like the structure and or like how the nesting structure is really important to HTML. All right, finally, let's talk about forms. So within the opening and closing form tags, we have inputs, and these inputs can be of different types, like plain text input, checkbox, or date picker, or file picker, or radio buttons, which are like multiple choice questions, or numbers, or a ton of other things. If you're curious, you can just look up HTML input types, and there will be like a huge list of them. So in this example, we include a text input, which just renders a box with a placeholder if you set that attribute. And then the second input is a submit type, which renders a button. And this is special because like the submit type means that when the user clicks this button, the browser gathers all the data from the form's input fields and sends it to the server-side script or URL, which we can define if we give the form tag an action attribute. So right now, the form doesn't actually send any data because this form tag doesn't have like action equals something, but that's something that we could do in the future. All right. So as we've seen across the previous slides, HTML elements exist in this kind of parent-child sibling relationship. So going back to the boilerplate code that we saw like right up here, this head and body and like HTML thing, the HTML element is the parent because it contains all the other elements within it. And then the head and body elements are siblings because they are both contained within the HTML element at the same level. So they're like this head and body are not each other's parent or child, but they're kind of just like existing on the same level. And then so on and so forth. You can kind of tell the family tree structure just by looking at the indentation within an HTML file. Like here, there's not too much indentation, but you can see that like HTML is the parent of body, and then body is the parent of H1 and P and H2 and so on. So what is the div tag? It stands for divider and it's used for content division, which means that it acts as a container for your content. And it's kind of like an invisible container because by itself, it doesn't have any styling or effect on the way your HTML looks. So like if you guys want an example, I can like add a div and put my paragraph inside of it. And it didn't really change anything about how my website looks, but now there's this div here that we can use later on, maybe like with CSS to add structure to our website. It's super useful in terms of like sorting your content into groups with different classes and IDs, which are attribute tags that like we talked about earlier. And it will really come in handy when we start talking about styling with CSS. Like for example, um, here we added like a, oh, sorry. Another way to think about it is kind of like a container or wrapper that we can put some content in. Like here we have the Cubstart div that has an H1 and a P inside. And then here we have the Cal Hacks div that also has text and content inside and it's kind of like separating it into two different sections. So it's like an organized container rather than just like four random text tags floating around inside the body. So this is an example of using divs kind of like to organize your code as a programmer, not to like style it in any certain way, but just so it's e easier for you to understand what's going on. Like if I saw all these random tags here, I might not have like an idea of what's going on, but here we can see that it kind of organizes it into like divisible little containers. So yeah, by itself, a div doesn't look like anything, but with CSS, styling, it allows you to compartmentalize your content. Like here, we've added a white background and a shadow to each container and some spacing in between, which we couldn't have done if the Cubstart and CalHacks text content were all within the body and not within their own div containers. So like if all these four tags H1P, H1P were all siblings inside a body, we couldn't have organized them into like two boxes like this using CSS. So they have to be these boxes are actually the div containers being styled by the CSS. All right, and then finally, here are just some online resources that I find super helpful as a web developer. There's these MDM web docs. Um, sorry, right here. Um, and if you go here to HTML, there's like tons of things um, that you can reference here. And then also W3 Schools, um, their HTML like tutorials and tons of different like yeah, there's a ton of resources like elements, attributes, blah 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 blah. There's like a lot of stuff you can reference here. So yeah, these are just two websites that I find myself using a lot when doing like plain HTML, CSS, JavaScript websites. And as I talked about before, you can also ask like LLMs about this. Like if you're thinking, oh, I want to like add a certain element, but I know how to describe it, but I don't really know like what exactly the element is called. You can probably ask like ChatGPT about it or something. But yeah. All right, so that was this will wrap up our first lecture, but thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, make sure to post it on Ed. And if for some reason you're not in the Ed, go ahead and shoot us an email at team@cubstart.com and we'll get you added. And yeah, thank you guys for coming, and this is going to be a great semester.